Good afternoon. We've got a little bit of time. We told you we were going to end at 2 o'clock, and we're going to do that. We're going to end at 2 o'clock. But first, before I begin this final session, I just want to say thank you to Christ Chapel Bible Church and everybody who's worked so hard, the AV team, the producers, Pastor Cody, the other pastors who were here. They fed us, gave us coffee, put together the program, made all of the arrangements. And I want to say thank you to our Summit Ministries team as well. Steve is here. Mark Erickson, he runs a department at Summit Ministries called Powered by Summit. And because we decided several years ago, Mark and I had this conversation, and we realized most people can't come to a 2-week intensive program. But what if we could take a program take our program and customize it for anybody, anywhere, at any length of time? And Mark said, I think that's a great idea. We can do that. Just this year, I think we've reached 10,000 people in customized programs like the one that you're seeing here this weekend, including one that we did with Christian musicians and filmmakers in Nashville on how to communicate a biblical worldview, a weekend program with Service Academy cadets, just, all different kinds of things. So God's doing amazing things, but we love this partnership with Christ Chapel Bible Church, and I don't know how many students we've had come to Summit Ministries over the years from here, but I would say it's probably closing in on 100 students. 100 students from one church coming to this program. That tells me that this is a place that's intentionally investing in the rising generation of leaders. So thank you to everybody here. As we dive into the final program, I thought earlier I told you about Manitou Springs and said it was a hippie town and all of that, and some of you may have been thinking, yeah, but what does it actually look like? Well, here's a picture. This is a picture of the town. That's a real picture. That's not just a painting. That's not just a, Kincaid painting of some kind. That's the real town. It really is that cute. It looks like a little train set. But if you were to go down to the street level on a weekend, it actually looks a lot more like this. And I will tell you that people in our town have a lot of beliefs. And the main way people express their beliefs is through bumper stickers on their car. They witness to their faith by how they put these bumper stickers on there, and you can tell exactly what this person believes. And also the person has a sense of humor because this bumper sticker says, I express my individuality through mass-produced bumper stickers. But it happens all of the time, doesn't it? And it's not just on bumper stickers on cars. It happens through the memes that we post online. There are all sorts of ways that we just sort of take a bumper sticker idea and put it out there and try to settle the issue once and for all. Speaking of memes, my favorite meme is this one. You keep using that meme. I don't think it means what you think it means. So every conference needs a Princess Bride reference. That was it. Thank you very much. That was it. Yeah, that was it. So at Summit Ministries, we try to figure out, what do people believe? What do they think? How are they processing all of these things? And how are we going to know whether the program we're using at Summit Ministries to reach people is really making a difference? Some of the things we have found are rather startling, especially when it comes to the rising generation. For instance, we found that 83% of Christian church-attending millennials strongly agree or agree somewhat that the root of society's problem is that rich people exploit the system in a way that hurts the working class. We actually framed this exactly the way the Communist Manifesto would state it, and 83% of Christian church-attending millennials agreed with that. 72% said they strongly agree or agree somewhat that that meaning and purpose come from being one with all that is, which is a new spiritualist or new age belief. 63% said they strongly agree or agree somewhat that what is morally right and wrong changes over time based on society. There are no moral absolutes. 63% of church-attending, self-identified Christian young adults. 60% of Christian church attending millennials strongly agree or agree somewhat that no one can know for certain what meaning and purpose there is to life. And I thought, well, I can see all of those views being accepted by people. What this is telling me, if you have two contrary viewpoints, like secularism and new spirituality are exactly the opposite. Secularism says only the material world exists, the spiritual world is an illusion. The new spiritualist worldview says only the spiritual world exists, the material world is an illusion. How could you hold both of those equally? It seems that the worldview of our day is what other researchers call syncretism. In other words, I evaluate every one of these statements individually on its own merits, not out of a desire to have a coherent worldview. In other words, if it sounds good to me at the time, then I will say it's a good idea. And I thought, well, surely at least some aspects of an Islamic worldview would not fit into this. And what we found, this is our result. 50% of Christian church-attending millennials strongly agree or agree somewhat that the root of society's problem is failing to make society submit to God by force if necessary. 50% of Christian church-attending millennials agreed with that. So what do you do in a world where people have so much confusion? They hear things on television and they just think, oh yeah, I basically believe everything. Every belief is equally valid. And it never occurs to them, if every belief is equally valid, then every belief is equally invalid, logically speaking. So how do you handle this? Well, we go back at Summit Ministries to our DNA double helix. We always want to focus on truth. We never want to short-circuit truth, but we always want to do it in the context of relationship. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we believe that truth without relationship leads to arrogance. Relationship without truth leads to apathy. So we've got to have both of these all of the time. We're guided by a couple of different passages in Scripture, but one of them is this one, 2 Timothy 2:2. What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. You kind of picture there the passing of the baton of truth from one generation to the next. A baton relay is only won if the final runner is able to cross the finish line first. You've probably seen these races, even at the Olympics. I remember in 2008, the tragedy of the U.S. women's 400-meter relay team. This team would easily have won the gold medal. They were four of the best athletes on the planet. And one of the athletes dropped the baton, and it rolled out of their lane, and they couldn't retrieve it. They were disqualified from the race. So how do we pass that baton of faithfulness? And I'd like to talk about 10 different ways. These are, again, very practical strategies. Somebody asked me last night, what's your goal for people by the end of the day? And I said, I want them to come away feeling like there are really practical things that you can do, things you can say to form relationship, things that you can put into practice right away, like tonight, that will help you be the kind of person who speaks truth in the context of relationship. So, are you ready? We've got about 30 minutes. We will dive right in here. Let me start with this. The first thing you can do to win hearts and minds is to show caring. To show caring. It's important to use my whole being to express caring. Here's something you might find interesting. According to the psychologist Albert Mehrabian, who did this study in the 1960s, 55% of our communication is through our posture and facial expressions. 38% of our communication is through our tone of voice. Only 7% of communication is through our words. What does this tell me about communication? Never let social media define the way you reach out to the world. Never do it. Why? Because you're constraining yourself to 7% of your potential message. Somebody said, well, we can use emoticons. No. If somebody thinks you're being sarcastic, putting a smiley face or a wink at the end does not change the received meaning. I taught MBA students for many, many years, and my students were already, in order to get in the program, they basically already had to be in a supervisory position. So some of them had 10 to 20 or 30, 50, 100 people they were responsible for already as young people in their 20s. And I would tell them, prefer the personal. Prefer the personal. The more personal it can be, the better. If it's just a logistical piece of information, what time are we meeting at the restaurant? You can text back, 6:30. It's fine. But if it's, why did you choose that restaurant? That's not a text response. That's a phone call. Okay? If you can't meet in person, you do a phone call. I can't tell you, we talk about this with our team all of the time. If it's going to take you more time to compose an email response to somebody's email, then pick up the phone and call them. The more personal is always better. We can show caring. Second thing is to make the message clear. Communicating a clear message. A clear message does not mean necessarily a message that someone likes. One of the things we start to discover is what people don't like, who are not believers, is when you try to pretend that you don't believe what you really do believe. That gets on their nerves, and you can well imagine how it would. So how do you communicate a message? Let's say somebody gives you the opportunity. Well, first of all, you want to get the attention of the other person based on what is important to them. Remember, in communication, you're not making yourself the center of it. In fact, you're trying to get out of the way. If someone comes to me and says at the end of a talk, "You're a great communicator," I feel a little bit discouraged by that, because the entire point is that you won't notice that I'm the one doing the communication because you're taking the point that I'm teaching away with you. That's my ultimate goal. It gets the attention of a person. Second of all, it shows the need, the core problem that must be addressed. Third thing is, it provides a solution to the problem. And then fourth and finally, it asks for action. You're going to see this on several different slides as I go through it. Ask for action, a change of mind, or a specific set of steps. Don't be afraid to ask for action. Can I pray for you? I mean, I ask my students at Summit Ministries, when we get to a certain level of relationship, what barriers would stop you personally from living a life that's fully committed to Jesus? And if I've developed a safe environment, I will get honest answers to that question. And some of them are not what you would expect. Very few people say something like, "I'm not intellectually convinced." People will more likely say something like, "I'm addicted to porn and I don't know how to stop, and I think I'm useless to God now." I literally get that from students. One student actually came to me and he said, "I know what my barrier is." I said, "What's that?" He said, "That I don't care that I have a barrier." I said, "Oh, apathy." He said, "Yes." I said, "Great, that's progress." He said, "Really? What do you mean?" I said, "Well, can I pray for you that God will give you a heart of concern for your own purpose in life and for the lives of people around you?" See, it's a starting place. But at the same, you're always, how do you get the attention of a person based on what's important to them? How do you present? This is the need, this is the solution, and would you change? If you think about this, evangelism is really this, isn't it? Have you experienced anxiety or depression? 50% of people say they have. You know, the need of people is to feel that their lives on this earth have meaning, because we're not going to last forever, right? I don't know if you've noticed this, but 1 out of every 1 person dies. Your chances are not very good that you will get out of this life alive, unless there's something beyond the grave, in which case we're talking about something where we would have to know. How would we know if there's something beyond the grave? You see, people enjoy these discussions if they don't feel like you're trying to force them to agree with you and reach a certain conclusion. Does that make sense? So you could just bring it up and then let the seeds be planted in people's minds and hearts. All right, third, avoid creating unsolvable fear. Avoid creating unsolvable fear. Somebody asked me the other day, why do you think that the climate activists haven't gotten traction? I said, well, I just think you should look back at climate messaging over the last 30 years. And the answer will be obvious. It's terrifying. I read an article yesterday that was from 2004. A British newspaper said, we uncovered a secret Defense Department report that shows that rising sea levels will turn Britain into Siberia by the year 2020. And they're like, here we are in 2022. Britain's not Siberia yet. And in fact, it said there will be nuclear. It was so dramatic. It was the kind of quote as debaters we loved. Like, you solve the problem of hunger over here, then people will eat more beef. And if they eat more beef, they will tear down the trees to grow the beef. And if they tear down the trees, they'll create a climate catastrophe. And nations will war against one another. And there will be nuclear conflict. And everyone will die. Like, that's the perfect debate quote. But it doesn't reflect reality at all. What happens? If people feel terrified, they do nothing. They do nothing. We cannot create unsolvable fear. Of all of the fears that people have, the number one fear for adults, you might find this interesting. According to Chapman University's study of fears, they do this every year. Isn't that weird? The number one fear of adults, government corruption. Okay, listen to this very carefully. The number one fear of young adults, being alone. Being alone. You've heard of the fear of missing out. It's very real for young adults. If I make this decision to trust Christ, I might be alone. That is a real concern for young adults, and it's one that we have to talk about, we have to address. But it's not just that. 2/3 of people, according to some studies, have a sense of impending doom about where things are going in society. When you talk to psychologists, they tell you that that sense of impending doom is a classic sign of clinical anxiety. When people are afraid, they would rather do nothing than something. So we have to communicate. I am concerned about what is happening in our country, but we are not helpless. The things that people do to be faithful to what they know is true every day do matter. They do make a difference. And they spread out from there. There have been some really cool studies done, and I'll get to this point in just a moment, about things that you can do just to show kindness to somebody else. Sometimes just Google Starbucks and pay it forward. Because there have been experiments done where somebody said, I'm going to pay for mine plus the person behind me. And then the next person's like, wow, they paid for mine. Well, I'm going to pay for the person behind me. And their record is like 37 cars long, where everybody, and what happened? It's not just that people paid it forward to the next person who was in line behind them. It's that everybody went out feeling like some good had been done in the world. And what researchers are finding is when something like that happens, it's not a temporary feeling. It goes on for a long time. The people actually become more selfless and less selfish. It sets in motion a chain reaction. Very powerful. Okay, fourth, acknowledge the need for social validation. Social validation. People want to know that the people around them see things the way they see them. So if you're coming in with a viewpoint, a biblical worldview, to an environment where nobody's ever talked about a biblical worldview before, people are like, I think you're a little crazy. I know you're my grandma, but you're crazy, okay? You can't expect me to believe something if nobody else believes it. The studies on social validation are classic. They go to a big city, and they would have a person just stand there in the middle of the sidewalk when there's a crowd around, and then suddenly just look up into the sky. When the one person would look up, they would count the number of people around who also looked up, and only 4% of the people looked up. However, when they had 5 people all at the same time suddenly look up, 12% of the people around would look up. When they had 15 people all of a sudden just look up into the sky, 40% of the people in the area all looked up. We instinctively believe that if what we believe is true, there's got to be somebody else out there who says so. I think it may be one of the, when everything settles and we all get to heaven, I think we may find that the work we do at Summit Ministries is primarily to help kids realize that their parents aren't nuts. I really think that. I really do. Because every kid needs somebody who also says so, right? And my friend Ryan Dobson, whose father, Dr. James Dobson, famous psychologist, he said, when I went to school, he said, people were saying the opposite of what my parents said. And I had this fear inside of me. What if my parents are wrong? What if my parents are wrong? He said, when I came to Summit, I realized my parents aren't wrong. There's very good evidence for what they believe. That not only helped them in his relationship with his parents, but also helped him answer those deep needs of his heart. So you can say things like, I know it's important to know that you're in good company. You might be surprised by the number of people who find what I'm saying is plausible. And then you bring forward some of the evidence that you've seen in some of the books that are out there and others that you have in the church library. Okay, is this helpful so far? Number 5, get to know them. Get to know them. You're communicating the message, I like you. I like you, and I want to know what you think. It's fascinating to see how people, when they feel known and liked, are more receptive to whatever message we're trying to give them. Robert Cialdini is a persuasion researcher, and he did a study of online negotiation. And he found that the negotiations only succeed, they failed 30% of the time. So people would come to agreement 70% of the time. They failed 30% of the time. So they had the negotiators, before they started into the negotiation, tell a little bit about themselves and their family and who they are and what's important to them. And they each did this. When they did so, the failure level fell from 30% to 6% of the negotiations. In other words, they were 5 times more successful in negotiating when they just took a little bit of time to get to know the other person first. All right, number 6, offer a way to be consistent. Offer a way to be consistent. I will often say something like this to a person: you are a good listener. I know when you meet somebody like me who believes the things that I believe that it might be a little bit jarring, but thank you for your willingness to talk about difficult subjects with me. And I just want you to know, I will stand up for your freedom, whether you agree with me or not, to say whatever you say. And I hope that you would do the same for me. But I just want you to know that I'm going to do it for you. This is one of the most significant things that you can do in a conversation where there's genuine disagreement. To say we might walk away and still not agree, but if we feel that we can be safe to say what we really think, that's a victory for us, for our relationship, but also for the kind of environment that we want to create for the people around us. Number 7 is to deflect hostility. There are a few people in America who do see things in a conflictual way. So in the studies, the polls that Summit Ministries has done recently, for example, we found that 3% of people, and it's much higher among young adults, but 3% of people in America say they respond to a conflict with another person by cutting them out of my life. Okay? 3% of people said that. So 97% of people do not have that response. 3% said, I cut them out of my life. 2% of the people said, I get angry. That's 5%. That's 5% of the people who say, that is my response, that's what I'm all about. That's who I am as a person. 95% of people don't see themselves that way. But in a lot of environments, that person will find you. I mean, it happens to me. I was speaking at an event. It was in a church. A guy walked up to me afterward and he said, everything you just said is the exact reason why my generation has walked away from the church. I was like, oh, wow, that hurts. So what do I do? Wow, okay. I think we see this differently. Okay? It's real. The difference is real. We have differences. But I want you to know that's okay. I want to talk about this with you. We both care that people's lives are better. We both care that people feel settled about what they believe. We both want things around us to not feel like they're in conflict. We both are like that. Third, avoid focusing on personality issues. Look, we might not end up agreeing about this, but I thank you and I respect you for coming to confront me. That can't be easy, to just walk up to the speaker and just blast out something, that's hard to say. Thank you for being the kind of person who would be willing to do it, and I respect that in you. The next part of it is to avoid stereotypes. Our culture encourages us to see the worst in each other, but I like to think that we can work through disagreement. Does that make sense? In some ways, this is just very straightforward and simple, but when you're in this situation, you feel like you've got sucker punched. It's really hard to know what to do. But if your instinct is, thank you, that must have been very difficult to say that in the way that you did. Thank you for bringing to the surface the stuff that's probably already there. We should just talk about it. And then the final thing is to be friendly, but don't grovel or compromise. I know we don't see eye to eye, but you've given me a lot to think about, and I hope you feel the same. I try to never say something like, well, you have your truth, I have my truth. Or we'll just have to agree to disagree. I want the conversation to go on, but I want to deflect hostility. All right, let me give you a few more of these. If this is helpful, make sense? Like, this is not the best session to do right after lunch. I feel insecure about this. But encourage feedback. Here's what's really strange. Actual feedback is more persuasive to a person than their belief that the argument itself is persuasive. So I'll give you an illustration. There are a lot of studies back in the day to try to get people to stop smoking. What works to get people to stop smoking? What kinds of persuasive messages? They said, well, let's show them pictures of diseased lungs. Didn't work. Let's tell them their family wishes they wouldn't smoke. Didn't work. You know the number one thing that worked is when they would take a smoker, train them to give an anti-smoking workshop, and then send them out to deliver it. Because they experienced cognitive dissonance. They would go out and get actual feedback from other people, and then they would think, wait a second, I'm teaching all of this, I know all of this information, but I'm not living consistently with it. The very fact that they went out to get feedback from others helped to persuade them of the argument. This is why very often with young adults, I'll say something like, why don't you take this argument to your friends and get their feedback? See if they have any good responses and share them with me. It literally does not matter what their friends say. Their friends could say something like, this is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. And then they come back to me and say, my friend said this is the stupidest thing they've ever heard. Oh, wow. I mean, that can't have been easy for you to share that with me just now. Why did they think it was stupid? Well, they didn't have any good reasons. Oh, okay. Do you see how it's persuasive? All right, number 9, don't be discouraged by resistance. Thinking this through makes both of us stronger. Resistance is a natural part of the persuasion process. If there isn't resistance, the other person probably isn't thinking things all the way through. You want the resistance. You want to get to the place where the other person feels like he or she is able to make the decision. Okay, in our country, you see a lot of people, and some conservatives I see do this, but the massive amount of it that I see is on the secular left, or what people might call the progressive left. And what happens is this. The main persuasive message is to shame people. You should be ashamed. You should feel ashamed. I can't believe that you are the kind of person who would even believe that. Those kinds of shaming messages. What's weird is for the first time in my lifetime, it's not Christians who are using the shaming messages primarily. It's people on the secular left. When we teach students to ask questions, they go to their class and they're like, I am easily the most open-minded person in my class. I never thought that would be the case as a Christian because I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say. Why is it so significant? Because shaming messages make people be quiet, but they do not change their minds. It's what researchers call peripheral persuasion. They're like, okay, sure, whatever you say, just go away. But they remain unpersuaded. You remember this old saying? A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. I don't know why the secular left has missed that message, but their support among the rising generation, even though we see rising levels of socialism, dropout of church and all of that, the support of the secular left and the rising generation is very soft. In fact, some of my friends, one of my friends, a 20-something who reaches out to other 20-somethings, she said, I don't even call them Gen Z anymore, I call them Gen Free. Because they are so tired of being indoctrinated. They're so tired of being pushed around and told what to believe that they're actually asking questions. It's really incredible. Number 10 is to ask for change. To ask for change. Let me tell you about a funny study that was done many years ago. Again, they sent volunteers out onto a city street, and they walked up to people completely randomly and asked them this question: would you be willing to chaperone a group of juvenile detention inmates on a 2-hour trip to the zoo? Here's what's crazy. 17% of the people said, sure. Like 1 out of 5 said, yeah, happy to. It's completely random. That was study number 1. Study number 2, they walked up to people and asked them, would you be willing to be a mentor at the juvenile detention center for 2 hours every week for the next 2 years? No. 100% said no. Get this. They said, then the researcher asked this, well, if you can't do that, would you be willing to supervise a group of juvenile detention inmates on a 2-hour trip to the zoo? And 50% said yes. 3 times as many as in the original study. It's always been fascinating to me how asking for change is actually persuasive in causing people to think about the changes that they should make in their lives. That's why at Summit we always ask that question. What are the barriers that would stop you from living a life that's fully committed to Christ? So there are the 10 points. How about a bonus point? We'll call it 10.5. You ready? Keep your mood positive. Keep your mood positive. Several years ago, I was asked to work with a group of activists. They had a particular cause that they were promoting, and they wanted to involve young adults, but no young adults were getting involved. And they couldn't figure out why. So I went to meet with this group. The leaders of the group were stressed and angry. And I realized all of a sudden, I know why no young person wants to be with you. They don't want to advocate for your cause. They don't even want to be around you. Because it's always like, you could be like me. No, not really. They changed their approach to empowering young adults to do something positive to stand for the rights of other people on their campus. Huge increase. Now they have hundreds of college campus chapters and more involvement of young adults than almost any other group that I'm aware of. What changed? They moved away from the idea that we are angry because we can't make all of the difference we want to make, to the idea of we are the sorts of people who know that we can make a difference even when things don't seem to be going our way. And so we will continue to stand. And that was a cause that a lot of young adults wanted to be involved with. All right, let me wrap up. Before I'm going to tell you a story in closing, but as you get ready to leave, if you are interested, do remember that there's this book bundle. It's $40 for $70 worth of books to start your library with unquestioned answers, challenging conversations, secret battle of ideas about God, and why you matter. I think those are still available out here in the lobby, so you might want to pick those up before you go. If you haven't already gotten the notes or taken a picture of this, you can still do that right now. You can take a picture of this, scan me, and then that will allow you to get the copies of the notes for all of the PowerPoints for the sessions that I did, the 3 sessions that I just did. Because I know I'm a teacher. I have a lot of, sometimes I feel like it's that way at Summit Ministries. Students very commonly I'll ask them, what was it like? They're like, it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hydrant. You know, you get a lot of water, but it sort of hurts, right? Because there's so much. There's so much. And part of that is what I want to inspire people to do is to realize there's a whole lot more for you here. Be the sort of person who wants to learn and grow. Can I tell you one story in closing, another Manitou Springs story? This is the picture of the Summit Ministries Hotel. This part of the building was built in 1885, and since this picture was taken, we've remodeled it. But there's a feature that you may notice on the building. Anybody notice what it is? That there's a cross on the top, like a church. I have no idea how long that cross has been there, but it is an iconic part of Manitou Springs. If you are in Manitou Springs, downtown, you can look up at the Summit Ministries Hotel and see that cross there. Some of you have been out to Colorado. You drive through Colorado Springs out west toward the mountains. You drive by Manitou Springs at night. There's the cross. It's the main thing that you see in the town. And people in Manitou, they love spirituality. They love religious symbols. I talked to one young lady. I saw her downtown, and she had on lots of necklaces. By the way, tattoos are everybody who's spent all of the time and money to put a tattoo on their arm wants to talk about why they did it. I should have mentioned that earlier. It's a guaranteed conversation about something meaningful to that person. So somebody said, I can't believe everybody's all tatted up all the time. The best opportunity you've ever had to engage random people about what's important to them. So this young lady downtown had on lots of different necklaces. She had on a Star of David, which is Jewish. She had on a crescent, which is Muslim. She had on a cross. She had on the yin-yang of Taoism. I said, you got a lot of interesting messages there. She said, yeah, I don't really know what's true, but if I cross the street and get hit by a bus, I just want to make sure I have all my bases covered. It's kind of a cute response in a way, and you know, she meant it to be lighthearted. And I said, I know, please don't step out in front of a bus. You know, and we continued the conversation. I said, how would you actually know whether one thing is true or another? You see where you can go with that kind of simple discussion? Well, we have this cross up on top of the building. One day, in a windstorm, the cross got knocked over. The next morning, somebody came, knocked on the door of our office. The person working went to the front door, and the individual standing there said, your cross fell over in the windstorm. You need to get it back up there. The person working in the office knew who this individual was. So she said, yes, we will get it back up there. I really appreciate your letting me know. But I'm just curious why it's so important to you, because I know you're a Buddhist. And this individual said to our staff member, dude, the whole vibe of our town is off if your cross is not on. Don't miss the central lesson. That's the way we want it to be. If Christ Chapel Bible Church disappeared, there should be a huge gaping hole in Fort Worth. And wherever your home church is, if you're at West Campus or at South Campus, same thing for you. That when we lift high the cross, it's not like this man thought that it's some kind of a superstition or a karma or a vibe. But the truth is, when God's people stand for truth, all of culture is affected and blessed and experiences flourishing as a result. So I hope that you feel like this has been a valuable time, investment of a weekend. And I recognize how rare it is to get time to come to something like this and to be here for an entire weekend, how precious and valuable your time is. So thank you for it. And can I just pray a prayer of blessing over you all as we close? Father, I want to lift high your cross. I want to lift it in a way that other people would notice that truth is there, that you're a God of blessing, that your desire is that each one be reconciled to you. I recognize that some plant, others harvest, and sometimes we don't even know in any given conversation exactly where we are, but I pray that you would enable us to be people who are bold, people who are curious, people whose instinct is to interact with others in such a way that they just know that they're made in your image and that you want relationship with them very much. I pray that you would enable us to communicate the truth with more confidence. We're not going after the mic drop moment. We're going after relationship and truth and just connecting those two with the little things or the big things that we have the opportunity to do every day. So we pray that you'd embolden us to do it. In Jesus' name, amen.